Oakland has given the world some of music's most iconic voices, and today, it mourns the loss of one of its brightest. Dwayne Wiggins of Tone, a pillar of R&B, has died at 64. And in a heartbreaking twist of fate, beloved soul singer Angie Stone also passed away in a tragic car crash, just moments after finishing a concert in Mobile, Alabama. Life has a cruel way of catching us off guard. And in just the early months of 2025, we've seen 17 legendary black stars taken from us. Suddenly, painfully, and far too soon. Some died in silence, alone in empty apartments, long forgotten by the industry they helped build. Others were on the verge of a comeback, only to have their second chance stolen. A few had fortunes worth millions, but all the wealth in the world couldn't buy them one more breath. These were icons, admired, adored, unforgettable. But now, their names echo through tragedy, their glory reduced to fading headlines. As we revisit their stories, you'll feel the weight of it all, the fragility of life, and how quickly the spotlight can go dark. Angie Stone, the Grammy-nominated soul icon, died alone in a tragic highway crash, ending a life that once moved millions. She was a legend in the making from the start. As part of the Sequence, the first female rap group ever to perform on national television, Angie helped shape music history. Her solo breakout hit, Wish I Didn't Miss You, earned Grammy recognition and became an anthem of heartbreak and resilience. She lit up the BET Awards, graced movie screens, and stood tall as a powerful black woman in the entertainment world. But in the end, her final chapter was written far from the spotlight. It was March 1, 2025. Atlanta's sky hung low and gray. At 7:42 a.m., Angie's 2021 Cadillac Escalade tore down I-285, clocking 87 miles per hour. She was alone. Her nails were chipped, her coat wrinkled, and her eyes tired. Just hours earlier, she'd wrapped a session in a bare-bones studio in Decatur, a converted warehouse with no engineer, no soundproofing, just Angie and a dream on outdated recording software. Garbage trucks groaned outside as she laid vocals for Comeback Queen, the song that would never be released. Once a chart topper with million-dollar contracts, she was now gigging at small lounges for a few $100s a night. Her former mansion in Lithonia had been foreclosed in 2022. She was drowning in debt, $240,000 owed to the IRS, with a drawn-out lawsuit stealing what was left of her spirit. Her biggest hit had been sold to a budget perfume brand. She found out standing in line at Dollar Tree, hearing the song warped through a cheap speaker. It broke her heart. That morning, she was en route to sing at a small church in Marietta. No pay. Just passion. No manager, no assistant, just Angie and the road. Then came exit 33. A white Freightliner truck slammed into her Escalade with devastating force. The SUV spun 3 times, flipped, then skidded nearly 70 feet. Smoke rose. Airbags deployed too late. The impact crushed her chest against the steering wheel. A bystander saw her arm lift briefly, then fall still. Paramedics reached her 7 minutes later. 2 minutes after that, her heart stopped beating. On March 4th, her apartment was sealed. Inside, they found 34 unreleased tracks, piles of unpaid tax notices, and a faded photo of the Sequence taped to the fridge. Her funeral took place on March 7th. No cameras. No Hollywood tributes. Just 3 old friends from the Sequence and a quiet pastor from her childhood church. Angie Stone, the voice who once made the world pause, died unheard, unseen, and forgotten by the fame that once adored her. Young Scooter, the infamous trap icon, met a violent end in a high-speed police chase that felt ripped straight from one of his lyrics. Once a rising star in Atlanta's trap scene, he helped define a generation with his raw, groundbreaking Street Lottery mixtape. He traded bars with Future, held his own with Gucci Mane, and earned respect in the underground. But in the end, his legacy didn't fade. It crashed, burned, and bled out on the streets that made him famous. March 28, 2025. 3:14 a.m. Atlanta. A matte black Dodge Charger Hellcat screamed down Metropolitan Parkway, its back window shattered, tires scorched from the chase. Sirens blared behind it. Behind the wheel, Kenneth Edward Bailey, better known as Young Scooter, was fleeing a police sting after a suspected drug deal in Lakewood went sideways. He wasn't pulling over. He never planned to. Inside the car, a duffel bag stuffed with cash, dried blood on his wrist, and an empty Glock on the passenger seat. Just hours before, he'd left a low-profile party. No music, no friends, only cold stares from men in the drug trade and a table full of money. Scooter was no longer living like a star. The fame had faded. The label dropped him. Broke, drowning in debt, and facing assault allegations after an altercation with his girlfriend backstage, he was spiraling fast. The chase lasted nearly 20 minutes. He flew through intersections, swerved past pedestrians, refusing to stop. At the Langford Parkway Bridge, it all ended. The Hellcat lost control, spun 3 times, and slammed into a concrete wall. The front axle shattered. His chest caved in. No seatbelt. Airbags failed. By the time paramedics reached him, it was too late. At 4:11 a.m., his heart stopped at Grady Memorial Hospital. In his pocket, police found a USB drive labeled Tum Dant 1, a draft of an unreleased album. One lyric echoed again and again, "They gonna chase me till I'm gone." His funeral, held on April 1st, was quiet. No celebrities. No fanfare. Just silence. Young Scooter didn't just die in a car crash. He died being chased by the same streets that once crowned him king. Dwayne Wiggins, the quiet giant of R&B, gone without applause. Dwayne Wiggins was never one to chase the spotlight, but his fingerprints are all over the soundtrack of a generation. As the heartbeat of Tony, and the quiet architect behind the early careers of Destiny's Child and Alicia Keys, he shaped the sound of R&B with nothing more than a guitar, an unmatched ear, and a relentless passion for the music. He didn't need the fame, just the melody. But in the end, the silence that surrounded his passing was deafening. On March 7, 2025, in a dim room at the Alta Bates Hospice in Oakland, California, Dwayne Wiggins took his final breath. No flowers. No family. Just a worn-out guitar collecting dust by the window, untouched for weeks. His body, once full of rhythm and fire, had withered from the inside out. Diagnosed with bladder cancer in August 2023, Wiggins told no one. Not even close friends. He kept performing, kept teaching, kept pouring his soul into the music, even as the disease stole pieces of him day by day. He vomited blood backstage. Sat alone in hospital waiting rooms. Fought quietly, bravely, with no entourage and no pity. In March 2024, he began chemotherapy but refused to let anyone see him weakened. He canceled shows without explanation, never wanting sympathy, only dignity. When the cancer spread and doctors urged more treatment, he declined. "I don't want my students to see me bald," he told a nurse. "I don't want to be remembered like that." Until January 2025, he still wore his signature suits, still taught weekly classes, still lifted young musicians with the same wisdom that built legends. But one day, mid-lecture, he collapsed. He never returned to the classroom. On the night before he died, he requested one last thing. A cassette of old recordings, rare demos, echoes of a life spent creating beauty. He didn't sing. He just closed his eyes, lips barely moving, as if whispering lyrics only he could hear. At 6:42 a.m., his heart gave out. No applause. No spotlight. Just silence. Dwayne Wiggins left this world the same way he lived. Humble, soulful, and far too uncelebrated for the genius he truly was. Coco T, the final tragedy of a reggae king. He once ruled the reggae airwaves like a lion in summer. Coco T, the voice behind Rocking Dolly and I Lost My Sonia, stood tall among giants like Dennis Brown and Jimmy Cliff. For decades, he was more than just a musician. He was Jamaica's heartbeat, a symbol of pride and soulful resistance. But few could have imagined that his final days would be spent not on stage, but as a forgotten figure in the rain-soaked silence of Kingston. It all began to unravel in 2022. A stubborn cough, brushed off as nothing more than a cold, masked something far worse. The diagnosis? Stage 3 lymphoma, already spreading from his neck to his chest. But Coco T kept it all hidden. Not even his 3 sons, who had picked up the mic in his footsteps, knew. He chose to fight in silence, vanishing from the spotlight as stages once ablaze with his energy faded into memories. In January 2024, during a small show in Montego Bay, he collapsed after singing his final line. Doctors discovered severe pneumonia. His body, already thin and frail, was barely holding on. Back home, he retreated into a cramped, dimly lit room with peeling yellow walls and a ceiling that leaked with every storm. On a dusty shelf sat a few pill bottles and a weathered photo of him and Dennis Brown, 2 kings frozen in time. He could no longer write, so he recorded voice diaries. Fragile, haunting clips filled with shallow breaths, fading words, and the soft whir of a dying ceiling fan. His royalties had dried up, government aid barely reached $300 a month, and meals came quietly, left at the door by loyal fans who never forgot. On the night of March 10, 2025, he stepped outside for the first time in months. The rain fell. The wind cut deep. He whispered a line from I Lost My Sonia, then coughed violently, blood marking the handkerchief in his hand. He refused to go to the hospital. Hours later, at 4:08 a.m., his heart gave out. A massive heart attack. The ambulance, delayed by flooded streets, arrived only to find a legend already gone. His funeral was small, quiet. A plain wooden casket, draped in a faded Jamaican flag, laid to rest in a temple in St. Andrew. The headstone read, Calvin George Scott. He never stopped singing. DJ Funk, the ghetto house pioneer, died alone, surrounded not by fans, but by silence. Born Charles Chambers, DJ Funk was more than a name. He was Chicago's pulse, its raw, relentless rhythm. With thunderous 909 kicks and gritty bass lines, he didn't just play music, he defined it. As the founder of Dance Mania Records, he created an entire genre, ghetto house. A sound that was wild, rebellious, and unapologetically street. Tracks like Worked at Body and Booty Bounce lit up basements and warehouses, shaking the city to its core. But legends fall too. On March 5, 2025, everything stopped. The speakers in his small 6th-floor apartment on Homeman Avenue went quiet. No more red hoodie. No more marathon sessions hunched over a laptop, fingers flying across keys like fire. Just silence, and the still body of a man who gave everything to the beat. DJ Funk died alone, without applause, without goodbye. He didn't follow trends, he invented them. While others chased acid house and deep techno, Funk birthed something raw. His sound was pure Chicago, aggressive drums, chopped-up vocals, and an energy you could feel in your chest. But that success came at a brutal price. Behind the club lights were drugs, burnout, and breakdowns. He spiraled through cocaine-fueled nights and recording sessions that stretched 20 hours. In 2009, meth charges landed him in jail. He shrugged it off. But the fall had begun. Dance mania lost its grip. His records stopped selling. Yet Funk kept going, obsessed, unstoppable. He recorded constantly, convinced the next track would be the one. By 2023, his body started to fail. A tumor appeared. He ignored it. Chemo was too slow, too dulling. He needed his edge. By December, it was too late. Stage 4 cancer had reached his liver and bones. Time was bleeding out. Still, he didn't stop. In pain, nearly broke, he dropped one last remix on Instagram. Still bounce. Still kickin'. Not gone yet. Days later, on March 4th, the pain became too much. He collapsed in his bathroom. By morning, in the ICU of Cook County Hospital, DJ Funk was gone. No family. No crowd. Just a flash drive with 327 unreleased demos and the ghost of a genre he helped build. At his funeral, there were no big names, no big stage. Just a coffin, a USB, and the memory of a man who turned the streets into sound. His death didn't just mark the end of a life, it marked the silence of a movement. The bass line stopped. And with it, a chapter of Chicago's soul faded into the dark. Irv Gotti, the lonely fall of Murder Incorporated as mastermind. Irv Gotti, born Irving Lorenzo Jr., once ruled the early 2000s music scene like a king. As the founder of Murder Incorporated Records, he turned Ja Rule and Ashanti into household names, delivering timeless anthems like Always on Time and Foolish. At the height of his empire, Irv was the man everyone wanted to be, champagne flowing, private jets soaring, and hit after hit dominating the charts. But behind the glitter was a storm brewing. His success came at a devastating cost. Fame, fortune, and fast living created a fragile illusion. By the mid-2000s, it all started to unravel. Ties to drug kingpin Kenneth Supreme McGriff brought federal heat, and though Irv beat the charges, his name was forever stained. The empire he built began to crumble. From 2006 to 2015, he was no longer a mogul, just a fading name with stories of past glories. He bounced between guest lectures and dead-end meetings, often arriving late and intoxicated, clinging to memories that no longer had an audience. His $4.7 million penthouse, once the epicenter of wild parties, became a cold, empty monument to a life slipping through his fingers. Debts piled up. Friends disappeared. Loneliness crept in. Then came the health problems. Diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2022, Irv ignored every warning. Late-night drinking, drug binges, and greasy meals became the norm. In 2024, a minor stroke should have been a wake-up call, but he refused treatment. Instead, he kept posting Rolex selfies and Tupac quotes on Instagram, pretending the crown still fit. But on February 5, 2025, reality struck hard. Alone in his kitchen, where champagne once popped and beats once blasted, Irv collapsed, reaching for insulin he never got to use. No one was there. No one called for help. Death came in silence. The hospital report was brutal, complications from diabetes and stroke. His stomach was empty, except for alcohol. No children. No will. Over $1.2 million owed in taxes. Irv Gotti didn't just die, he vanished, with no one left to call him a legend. Once the architect of an empire, he became a cautionary tale. A man who couldn't escape the darkness he once danced in. In the end, he wasn't a king. Just a ghost of what could have been. DJ Unk. The beat that faded too soon. DJ Unk, born Anthony Platt, was once the heartbeat of Atlanta. With just one track, Walk It Out, he lit a fire under a generation and turned Southern dance rap into a cultural movement. That song wasn't just a hit, it was a lifestyle, a rhythm that pulsed through block parties, clubs, and car speakers across the South. But even music that powerful couldn't protect its creator from the quiet tragedy that followed. On January 24, 2025, in a crumbling apartment near Edgewood Avenue, where his anthem once shook the pavement every Friday night, DJ Unk died alone. At just 42, his heart gave out. No stage lights. No applause. Just silence. Unlike many in the spotlight, Unk never flaunted riches. No Bentleys. No mansions. Just beats, lyrics, and an undying love for music. Walk It Out was his gift to the world, a soundtrack for joy, unity, and movement. But fame is fleeting. The music scene evolved. The calls slowed. And the name DJ Unk slowly faded from the charts. In 2016, the diagnosis came, heart failure. But instead of resting, he pushed harder, grinding through late-night shows, grueling tours, fast food meals, and hotel rooms. In 2021, after receiving a defibrillator implant, he still refused to slow down. He played dimly lit clubs to shrinking crowds, wearing his pride like armor. Atlanta legend. That's what his shirt said on the night he died, slumped on a worn-out sofa, surrounded by nothing but a half-empty water bottle, a slice of cold pizza, and 2 expired pill bottles. No fortune. No will. No final words. Just a broken heart and a legacy hanging in the air like the echo of a fading beat. When news of his passing hit, fans and fellow artists raised over $60,000 in days to cover his funeral. But DJ Unk never needed money. What he needed, and what he truly had, was something greater: to live forever through the rhythm he gave the world. The last dance may not have happened on a stage, but in the streets of Atlanta, DJ Unk will always be remembered. A true legend. The man who made us walk it out. Tommy Hunt, the final note of a forgotten legend. Tommy Hunt once moved hearts with a voice dipped in honey and soul. As a member of the legendary Flamingos, he helped craft some of the most romantic sounds of the 50s and 60s, none more iconic than I Only Have Eyes for You, a love anthem that still echoes through time. Later, his solo hit Human captured lightning again, if only for a fleeting moment. But fame, as always, is fickle. After the spotlight faded, Tommy's name slowly disappeared into the mist of music history. On a rainy January 27, 2025, he passed away quietly in a third-floor apartment at a senior living complex in Atlanta's West End. The room was dim, filled with the crackle of a rusted record player, dusty black and white photos, and the quiet company of scattered pill bottles. At 91, his heart simply gave out, not from illness or tragedy, but from the quiet weight of time. But his death wasn't just the loss of an elderly man, it was the final verse in a bittersweet ballad of a life once larger than sound. Tommy Hunt lived a story that soared, stumbled, and ultimately slipped into obscurity. After leaving the Flamingos in 1961, his solo career flickered briefly. Human brought him love from the crowd, but the changing tide of music left him behind. Devoted to classic R&B, Tommy became a relic in an industry obsessed with reinvention. In the 70s, he moved to England, where he found a modest revival in the northern soul scene. But it was never the same. He played smoky clubs, recorded in back-alley studios, always chasing the ghost of former glory. His marriage crumbled. His daughter drifted away. And by 1986, Tommy returned to America alone, performing in community centers where the crowd didn't remember his name, only that he once sang songs their mothers loved. By the end of 2024, his body began to fail. His hands trembled. His vision blurred. He refused hospitals, clinging instead to old records and fading memories. When medics arrived after 2 days of silence, they found him seated in an armchair, clutching a 1958 photo from the Apollo Theater. Beside him was a notebook filled with lyrics, most unfinished, except one final line. "If they forget my name, let them at least hum the tune." Tommy Hunt died with no fame left to his name, but a song still lingering in the air. A melody waiting, hoping, to be remembered. Samuel David Moore, the soul man whose voice once lit fire in millions of hearts, has slipped quietly into the shadows. As one half of the iconic duo Sam and Dave, his raw, heartfelt vocals gave the world, Soul Man, an anthem that defined a generation. He stood shoulder to shoulder with legends, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and even shared the stage with Bruce Springsteen. But those glory days were long gone. On a cold January 10, 2025, in a faded hospital room in Nashville, one of soul music's greatest voices fell silent, and no one was there to hear it. No cameras, no fans, just the hum of machines and the quiet ache of a forgotten era. In his final years, Sam Moore lived in isolation, tucked away in a modest suburban home where the echoes of the past rang louder than any applause. After the peak of Sam and Dave in the 70s, his star dimmed. Despite brief moments in the spotlight, like working with Springsteen, he never fully recaptured his fire. Instead, he drifted, holding on to memories, replaying old records to empty rooms. Pain crept into his body, just as loneliness had crept into his soul. He never told anyone how badly his heart hurt. He just kept going quietly. When he finally passed, it wasn't headlines that marked his farewell. It was a small, somber service. A few friends, a handful of musicians, and scattered family. No roaring crowds. Just soft old songs playing in the background, not for fame, but as a final, whispered goodbye to a man who once gave the world his voice, and was left with only silence. Roberta Flack. A legendary voice silenced by suffering. She was a goddess of soul, a voice so delicate, yet so powerful, it stopped time. Roberta Flack rose to unimaginable heights with Killing Me Softly, earning 4 Grammy Awards, performing at the White House, and etching her name into music history. But by February 24, 2025, all that glory felt like a distant dream, fading inside a sterile hospital room in Washington, D.C. Outside, the skies hung gray and heavy. Inside, the woman who once moved millions to tears with a single note lay still. This had been her silent tormentor for nearly a decade, slowly stealing her body, her movement, her music, her voice. The fingers that once danced across piano keys now refused to move. The voice that once lit up the world was reduced to whispers of memory. She spent her final months in and out of hospitals, hooked to machines, barely able to lift a glass of water. That morning, a sudden heart attack ended her long, painful fight. There were no crowds, no spotlight, just a small bedside radio playing "Killing Me Softly One Last Time." As the song played, it wasn't just music, it was goodbye. Haunting. Heartbreaking. Final. Jerry Butler, a soul legend's final fade into silence. Jerry, the Iceman Butler, the velvet-voiced soul legend behind For Your Precious Love and a founding pillar of the Impressions, once commanded crowds with his music and earned respect as a statesman in Chicago's political halls. A Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee, Jerry was a symbol of elegance, power, and dignity. But on February 20, 2025, that powerful presence faded quietly in a modest nursing home room with no fanfare, no family by his side. Just the sterile hum of medical machines and the stillness of a forgotten man. His final years were a slow unraveling. Once a firebrand on stage, Jerry's body grew frail, his memories scattered, and his voice, the same one that stirred millions, fell silent. The old friends were gone. Curtis Mayfield, his soul brother, had passed years ago. The political allies he once stood beside had moved on or faded into the shadows. And Jerry sat alone, day after day, watching the Chicago skyline through a narrow window, as if waiting for the city to remember him. The night before he died, he barely moved, just sat in silence, eyes distant, as if listening to a song only he could hear. A final encore playing softly in the recesses of his soul. The Iceman didn't melt. He disappeared, quiet, cold, and heartbreakingly alone. Gwen McCrae, the golden voice of soul and disco, once lit up the world with her hit Rockin' Chair and ruled the dance floors of the 70s. Crowned the disco queen, she wasn't just a singer, she was the heartbeat of an era. With her bold fashion, electrifying presence, and powerhouse vocals, Gwen was a living soundtrack to joy. But on February 21, 2025, that dazzling light faded quietly in a corner of Pensacola, Florida. In the weeks before her passing, she made a few brief appearances on TV, clinging to the last flickers of her spotlight. But behind the camera, her once sparkling eyes were dimmed by fatigue, and her iconic voice, once strong enough to move the world, was reduced to a whisper. Age and illness had taken their toll. She died alone. No husband. No children. No colleagues stopping in to say goodbye. The home that once pulsed with music now echoed only with the faint sound of her footsteps and fading breath. At 4 p.m., her body gave out. She was found in her favorite chair, the same one where she wrote lyrics and dreamed up melodies that once made the world dance. Her eyes were still facing the window, as if watching one last sunset. A quiet ending for a woman who lived so loudly. Disco lost one of its brightest flames. And the world lost an icon. Roy Ayers, the jazz-funk icon, dies alone in a cold New York morning. Roy Ayers wasn't just a musician, he was the heartbeat of jazz-funk, a trailblazer whose rhythms shaped generations. With his soulful vibraphone and genre-defying sound, he gave us timeless treasures like Everybody Loves the Sunshine, a track that became more than music. It became a feeling. His work echoed through hip-hop, sampled by legends who saw Roy as one of their own. But on March 4, 2025, the music stopped. On a bitter spring morning in Manhattan, Roy Ayers took his final breath in solitude. Alone in his apartment, his frail body gave out after years of quietly battling heart disease. There was no spotlight, no farewell concert, just the stillness of a room that once pulsed with melodies. That night, Roy had sat quietly, hands resting gently on his beloved vibraphone, as if whispering one final note to the world. By morning, he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Roy Ayers left this world not with fanfare, but with dignity, his legacy etched into every beat he ever touched. Though he died alone, the music he gave us ensures he'll never be forgotten. Chris Jasper of the Isley Brothers, a legend's final note. In a quiet, cold room in New York City, a music legend took his final bow. Chris Jasper, the brilliant keyboardist and creative force behind the Isley Brothers, wasn't just a musician. He was the heartbeat of timeless classics like Footsteps in the Dark and Between the Sheets, and later carved out a fiery solo career that earned him a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In 2020, Jasper received a devastating diagnosis: stage 4 lung cancer. It hit like a thunderclap. But instead of retreating, he kept composing, kept creating, and kept smiling, even as his body slowly betrayed him. Cancer ate away at him cell by cell, but his spirit refused to fade. By mid-2024, pain had become his constant companion. Most days, he stayed in his Manhattan apartment, surrounded by silence, memories, and the same worn keyboard that had once lit up arenas. By February 20, 2025, Chris could no longer stand. His breath came in faint gasps, the room heavy with stillness. On February 23, he passed away, quietly, humbly, a giant slipping away without fanfare. The man is gone. But his music? It will echo through generations. George Foreman, undefeated in the ring, unstoppable in business, met his final match not in a bout under bright lights, but in the quiet of his own home. The two-time heavyweight champion, Olympic gold medalist, and iconic face behind the George Foreman grill built a legacy of grit, power, and reinvention. From knockout punches to kitchen counters, his name meant excellence. But on the morning of March 21, 2025, inside his Houston home, time threw the final punch. He wasn't in a stadium or a boardroom, just sitting in his favorite chair, the same spot where he often reflected on the brutal beauty of the battles he'd fought. The TV murmured in the background, but Foreman was still. A sudden stroke, swift and merciless, took him in moments. Those closest to him say he'd been silently enduring pain for months, pushing through it like the warrior he always was. But this fight had no rematch. The Iron Giant who once conquered the world now rests, having faced the only opponent no champion can defeat, time itself. Junior Bridgman, the billionaire who died alone behind his empire's doors. From the bright lights of the NBA to boardrooms worth billions, Junior Bridgman was the definition of success. After 12 seasons with the Milwaukee Bucks, he didn't just retire, he reinvented himself. Owning over 400 Chili's and Wendy's restaurants, he built a $1.4 billion empire and became one of the most admired businessmen in America. A legend on the court, a titan in the corporate world. But on the morning of March 11, 2025, everything came to a chilling end. Milwaukee's skies were gray, snow drifting softly across the city. Inside the sleek walls of Bridgman Foods headquarters, silence fell like a curtain. Junior Bridgman was found slumped in his signature leather chair, the same seat where he once sealed million-dollar deals, mentored young entrepreneurs, and steered his empire with unmatched vision. Now, it was his final resting place. A sudden heart attack took him without warning, leaving no time to call for help. In his final days, he kept pushing, visiting stores, smiling for staff, shaking hands like the champion he always was. But behind that strength was pain. Crushing chest aches, fatigue, warnings he refused to heed. He ignored them all. Rest wasn't an option. Doctors were unnecessary. He was Junior Bridgman, unstoppable, or so he thought. Fate, however, had other plans. And in the very heart of the empire he built brick by brick, he fell, alone, silent, and gone far too soon. Voletta Wallace, the final chapter of a mother's love. Voletta Wallace, the mother of hip-hop icon the Notorious B.I.G., spent her life doing more than just mourning her son. She became the guardian of his legacy. From launching a charitable foundation to producing the heartfelt documentary Biggie, I Got a Story to Tell, Voletta turned her grief into purpose. She was a mother who stood tall through unimaginable pain. When Biggie was murdered in 1997, it shattered her world. But she refused to let his name fade into silence. She poured her heart into preserving his story, fighting for justice, and helping families who had suffered from the same kind of violence that stole her son. But behind that strength, her body bore the cost of years spent carrying such a heavy burden. The pain crept in slowly, relentlessly. Still, she never complained. Even as her health deteriorated, she held on. Until one quiet February day, February 21st, Violetta took her final breath in the same Strasbourg home where she'd clung to memories of her boy. She passed peacefully in her sleep. Alone. 17 stars. 17 stories. 17 painful reminders that life is fleeting. Fame can light up the sky, but even the brightest flames fade. And yet, they lived. They loved. They mattered. These aren't just stories of loss, they're lessons. About resilience. About love. About the price of legacy. Leave a tribute in the comments for Violetta and the stars we've lost. And if you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, follow for more truths behind the fame. Because behind every spotlight, there's a soul and a story worth telling.